you, Kwan. Um, Thank you so much. Today I'll be speaking. Yeah, okay. Can you hear me? Today I'll be speaking about a few things on the economy. My background is basically with financial services. I've been building systems for them. One of the things that I've realized over the last couple of weeks was about economic growth. And one morning I got up and I read this article that Singapore has been punching above its weight. And I was curious as to what that article was about. And I read through the whole article, and of course, an elder statesman in our country said we have been growing the economy by adding megabytes onto the systems board. I'm a computer expert, and I can tell you that it doesn't work that way. The last time we used the term megabytes was back in the 80s. Today we're talking about gigabytes and terabytes of information. So if you just keep adding megabytes, what you have is just redundancies. You know, you can't just simply add megabytes onto a particular machine. Okay. Yeah, I'll speak a bit louder. So you can't just add. So what if you just keep adding more than a certain threshold? It just consumes more electricity, generates heat, and it dissipates heat. And there's no additional processing power. So I was thinking, you know, if computer experts around the world were to go on and just start adding more chips or megabytes, if I can say, by improving efficiencies and processing speed, then we would still be stuck with 8088 today. So luckily, computer professionals, we think a bit differently from the statesmen in the country. Secondly is, how do you improve performance? Do you just improve megabytes? No, the thing is, it's a whole area. So there's the CPU, which is the Itanium chipset, there's the Xeon chipset, and there's continuous innovation in the market. One important thing is, if I can draw an analogy of the chipset to what we have in our economy. Look at the education system. That is the one that actually produces the number of graduates in our society. So if you want to increase the performance, it's not just adding foreigners into the system, as they put it. You need to look at the education system as well. So that is the other element that we need to focus on. Lately, I've been called up by some people to develop econometric models for the economy. So what do I do exactly? Basically, I look at economics data, the last 30 years, and then I try to project it over the next 30 years. And to see whether if it makes sense that we can have a 7% growth, which is what we had in the last 30 years, over the next 30 years. So extrapolating those numbers, basically, I realized that our economy would grow to a 1.5 trillion economy. That's a whopping big economy. But look at our population growth. We are actually a declining population. We're not making enough babies. And do we have enough local population to support a 1.5 trillion economy as what the government claims that we're going to grow into? They didn't claim that actually by extrapolating the data. The fact is we don't. So if we're going to have domestic demand, most of the domestic demand is going to come through foreign imports. That means we're going to have more foreigners coming in, and that's the only way to grow the economy. And that is as simple as that, unless they can do some magic as well. Second, I wanted to talk about CPF and public debt. I've been reading a lot of articles recently, and some people claim that we are actually on the verge of bankruptcy. But this is not true. The fact is, our financial assets of the government is close to about $1 trillion if you include Temasek, GIC, MAS, and other Schedule 5 companies in the economy. So if you look at our national debt, it's about 200 billion. Though the debt to GDP ratio is very high, the basic thing is you don't look at debt to GDP ratio because we do have other financial assets. But what actually particularly struck me as something that was strange was $154 billion of CPF money was used in the public sector debt. Unlike the US economy, they say that 60% of debt to GDP, that's the ratio that they have. It's very high. In Singapore, there's no debt ceiling at all. But why is the government borrowing $154 billion from the CPF? They actually borrow the money for public projects. But if you look around Singapore, most of the projects are already done. The highways are constructed, the schools are built, we have an excellent port. So where is this money going to? That's a big question mark actually. So these are things that we need to know, and the government needs to be transparent about all this information. I also did recently a blog, and I tried to extrapolate. I was looking at the interest rates that are given by the CPF. Today the interest rates stand at 2.5%, and the economy has been growing at 7%, and it's just simple mathematics, right? Your assets have been underperforming, meaning to say we are not, as citizens, growing together with the economy. If you take the same numbers and you compare that with Temasek Holdings, Temasek has been growing 17% since inception. And if you were to extrapolate those numbers, what if you as a citizen had put that $20,000 into Temasek Holdings in 1980? You would have made $2.2 million, and that is your money. So if the government has borrowed money from CPF and funded public projects, you should grow with the government. Also, I've also been reading in the papers about how we should restructure the economy, whether we should use a shock therapy, that means we're going to transform the entire economy, or whether we should use a gradual approach. Singapore is a mature economy. You cannot change things overnight. And besides, there are different powers between the president and the parliament. So my take on it is we need to look at fiscal policies, meaning you need to look at government revenues, which is through taxation, which stands at 13% of the GDP, versus the expenditure. Expenditure ranges from 15 to 18%. So what does that mean? We run a budget deficit year on year. But we have structural surpluses. So how does the government actually balance the sheets? This is a well-kept secret actually. Each year we draw down $7 to $8 billion from the investment holdings. So from your Temaseks, from your GIC, etc. We draw down $7 to $8 billion, which actually further finances. That term is called supplementary budget into your economy, into your budget basically. So if you really look at it, where do we spend most of the money? 5% of our overall government spending goes into defense. That's about 10 to 11 billion dollars that's spent on defense alone. So if you ask me, 10 to 11 billion of a $40 billion spending, that is huge. That's 25% of your total government expenditure. Why can't we reallocate that and put that into education, into the social sector, and other areas where it can empower the people that needs to be retrained, people who can compete with the foreigners who come into our country. We are misallocating our resources, and these are areas that we need to address, and by making sure that there is enough momentum for this. And I've almost concluded. I haven't even referred to my notes yet. But one last thing before I go is, in order for anything to happen, what we need to look is policy changes. We need to have people who are vocal and who are ready to come and stand up and tell the government, look, your current expenditure, your allocation is not optimal. You need to look at local distribution of wealth. That means we need to have a shift from growth policies to wealth distribution policies. And once we can achieve that, then we can look at bigger pictures or what we want to do with our government reserves. With that, I think I've almost concluded my speech, and I'll hand it over to Kwan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kumaran. He has given us a pretty good idea on what he thinks about the disposition of our resources, especially the money the government spend. How much allocation they should give to defense versus how much allocation they should give to, say, education and health. According to Mr. Kumaran, they are spending an absurdly disproportionate amount on defense. $11 billion. All right. Of course, it's very nice to see F-15 flying in the sky. Do we really need F-15? How come the F-16 is not good enough? They bought the F-15 from America. How much does that cost each? I really don't know. I haven't been able to find how much exactly they spend on buying the F-15s. All right, you not only buy the plane once, you have to train your pilots, you have to buy spare parts and make sure they work throughout the life. These are extremely, extremely expensive items. I read somewhere that the F-15 originally was designed to carry nuclear weapons when it was first designed. The F-15 plane. Do we need to buy a plane that's designed to carry nuclear weapons? It's crazy. All right, let's not. I think I have more speaker. The next one is Jason. Mr. Jason Lee. He's a Singaporean, a very gung-ho young man who has very firm views about how our government should listen to the people and how we should put Singaporeans first. Jason.